Mom, apologize to my mother-in-law or get out of my house!
Those were the words my son Eric said that Thursday evening in front of the whole family at the dinner table I had helped them buy. I stood up slowly. I did not tremble. I did not raise my voice. I looked straight into the eyes of that woman, my son's mother-in-law, Karen, who was smiling with the expression of someone who believes she has already won a war. I said only a few words and left. 2 weeks later, Eric would knock on my door in despair. But that would come later. My name is Linda Henderson, I am 60 years old, and what I am about to tell you forever changed my relationship with my only son. I do not know if I did the right thing. I still ask myself that question at night when the house is quiet and the only sound is the ticking of the wall clock that used to belong to my husband. But before I continue, write in the comments what city you are watching from. It is important for us to know how far our stories travel. Do you know what the worst part of betrayal is? Not the moment when the blow lands. It is how long you fail to notice that the knife has been in your back the whole time. How many times you smiled, handed over money, stayed silent, endured humiliation thinking it was temporary, that it was for the family, that it was the right thing to do. Only later do you realize you were being used. Methodically, deliberately, cynically. But I am getting ahead of myself. Because at the end of this story I will reveal something even I did not expect. My late husband, Andrew, who passed away a year ago, did not just leave me an inheritance. He left me protection. A mechanism that activated at the very moment I needed it. He knew. He foresaw. And if you stay until the end, you will understand why real love sometimes reveals itself not in words but in foresight. It all began a year ago. February, a cold New York evening, big snowflakes falling, and I was making dinner. Andrew was supposed to come home from work at 7. We had been together for 36 years. 36 years of a happy marriage, and I never imagined it could end so suddenly. At 7:30 the hospital called. The voice was professionally calm, but I understood instantly. A heart attack. A massive one. They had brought him from work. He lost consciousness right in the office. Intensive care. I remember running up the slippery hospital steps, the metallic smell of disinfectant hitting my nose, the doctor walking toward me with a face that made words unnecessary. I did not get to say goodbye. I did not get to tell him how much I loved him. I did not get to ask what I should do next, how to live without him. Andrew was gone in a second, leaving me alone in this enormous world that suddenly felt cold and unfamiliar. The funeral passed in a blur. Eric stayed by my side, held my hand, said all the right things. At the time he seemed like my support. My only son, the one Andrew and I raised, into whom we poured everything. Paid for his education, helped him with his first job, supported him in everything. I thought he would support me now. I believed that. A week after the funeral, Andrew's attorney, Edward Grant, came to see us. A dignified, gray-haired man of about 65 with a perceptive gaze. He brought the will. And that was when the last thing I expected began. Andrew left everything to me. Absolutely everything. The 3 hardware stores he had built from scratch. Our 3-story house in New York with the garden where we spent so many happy days. All the accounts, all the savings. Eric received nothing. Then Edward Grant said something strange. A phrase I remembered but did not understand right away. Andrew loved you both very much. But he wanted to protect you from any kind of manipulation. Even the kind that can come from inside the family. He was a cautious man, Mrs. Henderson. And if something goes wrong, you come to me. I will know what to do. I did not understand those words then. Protect me? From whom? From Eric? No, that was impossible. Eric was our son, he would never hurt me. Andrew just wanted to make sure I was provided for. That was all. That was what I believed. Eric reacted calmly. Too calmly looking back. He hugged me and said, "Mom, it's right. Dad wanted you to have everything you need. I'm an adult, I can take care of myself. What matters is that you're okay." I cried with gratitude. I thought what a wonderful, understanding son I had. How wrong I was. The first months after Andrew's death I lived as if wrapped in cotton. The house felt huge and empty. I wandered through the rooms, touched his things, breathed in the scent of his cologne still lingering on his shirts. Eric called every day, visited on weekends. We drank tea in the kitchen, he told me about work, and I thought, here it is, my salvation. My family. My son. I did not yet know that everything would soon change. That people would enter my life and turn it upside down. That I would learn a truth that would make the ground vanish beneath my feet. But to understand how it happened, we must go back. Back to when everything was still good. When I was happy. I met Andrew when I was 23. I was working as a language arts teacher at a regular New York public school. The salary was small, but I loved my work. I loved the children, their bright eyes when something finally made sense to them. I loved the smell of chalk and old textbooks. Back then Andrew worked as a sales clerk at a hardware store. Tall, broad-shouldered, with warm brown eyes and a smile that made your soul feel lighter. We met by accident at a bus stop. I dropped my bag of notebooks, he helped me gather them. We started talking. He walked me home. A week later he asked me to the movies. Our first date was at a movie theater. I do not even remember the name of the film, because I spent the whole time watching him instead of the screen. Watching how he laughed, how he frowned in dramatic moments, how he glanced at me when he thought I didn't notice. After the movie we walked around New York until late at night talking about everything, and I realized here he was. My person. We got married a year later. A modest wedding, only the closest family. We had little money, but our happiness overflowed. We rented a tiny one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of the city, and I still remember how we painted the walls ourselves, how Andrew accidentally splashed paint on me and we laughed until we cried standing in the middle of that chaos. Andrew was an extraordinary man. He was never someone who settled for little. He dreamed of having his own business and would tell me in the evenings as we lay side by side, "Linda, I'm going to build something of my own. Our children will live better lives than we did." And I believed him, because when he spoke, there was such certainty in his voice that doubting him felt impossible. 3 years later our son Eric was born. I remember that day in every detail. The maternity ward, the newborn's cry, the look on Andrew's face when he held his son for the first time. He cried. My strong, steady husband stood there crying with joy, pressing that tiny bundle against his chest. He whispered, "Thank you, Linda. Thank you for our son." We raised Eric together. By then Andrew had already started his own business. He opened a small hardware store. He worked from early morning until late at night, but always found time for his son. He taught him how to ride a bike, played football with him in the yard, helped him with his homework. Eric grew up surrounded by love, care, and attention. I continued working as a teacher even though I did not have to. When things began going well for Andrew, when he opened a second store and then a third, money was no longer an issue. But I loved my work. I loved feeling needed not only at home but also at school. Andrew supported me. He would say, "Do what makes you happy, Linda. Money isn't the most important thing." We invested everything into Eric. We paid for a good school, then for his university. He studied economics and we were proud of him. When he graduated, Andrew threw a real celebration. We gathered all relatives and friends, sat around a big table in the house Andrew had built with his own hands. Well, he hired builders, but he oversaw every step and personally chose every detail. That house was our dream. A 3-story home with large windows and a garden where Andrew planted roses. "Roses are your flowers, Linda," he would say. "Beautiful, delicate, but with thorns. Just like you." And I would laugh because I had never considered myself a person with thorns. I had always been soft, accommodating. Maybe too accommodating. After university, Eric got a job at a financial firm. Andrew offered him a job in his business, but our son refused. "Dad, I want to make it on my own. Build my own career." And we respected his choice. We supported him in everything, helped him financially when needed, gave him advice. 36 years. We were together for 36 years. Of course we had arguments and disagreements. Who doesn't? But we always found a way to reconcile. We talked. We respected each other. I knew he would never betray me and he knew I would always be there. The last few years were especially happy. Our child was grown, the business brought in stable income and we could afford to travel. We went to Italy, to France, strolled through old streets, drank wine on cafe terraces. Andrew loved taking pictures of me. I still have an entire folder of those photographs. Me in front of the Colosseum, me by the Eiffel Tower, me in a Venetian gondola. I am smiling in every picture because I was happy. And then, in a single moment, everything collapsed. February. A regular workday. Andrew went to the office as always. He kissed me goodbye and said, "I'll be home tonight. Make something good for dinner." I nodded and waved to him from the window. That was the last time. The heart attack came suddenly. Massive, as the doctor said. His heart simply gave out. Maybe it was stress, maybe years of accumulated exhaustion. He always worked too much. I told him that many times, but he would just wave me off. "Linda, I'm not old yet, I'm fine." But he wasn't fine. And now he is gone. No more laughter, no more strong arms hugging me, no more wise advice. No more of the person who knew me better than I knew myself. After the funeral, I was alone in that enormous house. Eric would go back to his place every evening, and I wandered through the empty rooms, not knowing what to do. I would sit in Andrew's chair in his office, close my eyes and try to feel his presence. Sometimes it felt like he was right there. Like the door would open any moment and he would walk in, smile and say, "Why so sad, Linda? Come on, let's have some tea." But the door never opened. And I realized that my life now was loneliness. That all I had left were memories, and the hope that my son would be there for me the way I had always been there for him. I hoped for that so much. But life had a completely different script prepared for me. 4 months after Andrew's death, Eric called and said, "Mom, I want to introduce you to someone. I met a girl. Her name is Emily." There was something new in his voice. Excitement, joy, anticipation. I was happy. Truly happy. I wanted Eric to have his own family, to be happy. Maybe that was what he needed now. And maybe it was what I needed too. A new life, grandchildren, family holidays. I imagined us sitting at one table, laughing, sharing news. How naive I was. Eric brought Emily over on a Sunday. I prepared for the meeting as if for an exam. I baked an apple pie, cooked my son's favorite dishes, set the table in the living room. I put on my best dress, did my hair, even applied a bit of makeup. I wanted to make a good impression. When they walked in, I immediately saw Emily was beautiful. Very beautiful. Tall, slender, with long dark hair styled perfectly. Flawless makeup, an expensive coat, heels. She walked in with such confidence you would think she grew up on a runway. She smiled at me, but the smile never reached her eyes. Cold, polite practice. Emily offered me her hand and said, "Hello, Mrs. Henderson. Eric has told me so much about you." I shook her hand. Her fingers were cool, thin, with a perfect manicure. I suddenly felt clumsy, old-fashioned. My hands were a teacher's hands, the hands of someone who had worked all her life. Short nails, wrinkles, a callus on my middle finger from holding a pen. But I smiled and said, "Please come in. I'm so glad to meet you. Eric, help Emily with her coat." We sat down at the table. I poured tea, offered pie, tried to start a conversation. I asked Emily about her job, her family, her hobbies. She answered briefly, reservedly. She worked at a marketing agency. Her parents lived in New York. She loved to travel. Eric looked at her with such loving eyes that warmth spread through my chest. Maybe she's just shy, I thought. Maybe she needs time to feel comfortable. And then Emily's mother arrived. Karen appeared about half an hour later. She didn't even ring the doorbell. She simply opened it with her own key. "Wait." Eric explained awkwardly. "Mom, I gave Karen a spare key. Just in case. Emily was worried you might feel unwell, so we thought." I stayed silent. What could I say? It was my house, but I didn't want to ruin our first meeting with an argument. Karen walked in, gave me an evaluating look, and extended her hand like a queen greeting a subject. She was a few years younger than me, around 58, but looked much better. Fit, well-groomed, wearing an expensive suit and jewelry that clearly wasn't cheap. She radiated confidence and superiority. "Very nice to meet you, Mrs. Henderson," she said, sitting down in Andrew's armchair without being invited. "Eric has told me so much about you. I'm glad we finally met." She looked around the living room and I could see her gaze sweep over the old furniture, the portraits on the walls, the bookshelves. Her lips tightened slightly, as if she had seen something unworthy of her attention. "It's cozy here," she finally said. "Such a homey style. Very traditional." I understood it wasn't a compliment. It was a disguised criticism. But again I stayed silent. I offered tea and pie. Karen refused the pie and said, "I don't eat carbs. I watch my figure. But I'll have tea if you have green. I don't drink regular black tea." I didn't have green tea. I apologized and Karen nodded condescendingly. "That's all right. Next time we'll keep that in mind." Next time? I didn't yet know that this would only be the beginning. We sat at the table for about an hour. Emily and Karen spent most of the time talking to each other, discussing plans, renovations, trips. Eric nodded along, smiling. I sat quietly, feeling like a guest in my own home. And then Karen said a phrase that stuck in me like a splinter. She looked at me, smiled, and said, "You know, Mrs. Henderson, your home is very nice. But of course it's somewhat outdated, don't you think? These wallpapers, this furniture. All of this was probably fashionable 30 years ago. But now it looks so old-fashioned. You probably just don't keep up with modern trends. Understandable. At your age, renovations are no longer a priority." She said it with such a condescending smile, as if she were doing me a favor by pointing out my flaws. I felt something tighten inside me. This was my home. The home Andrew built for us. Every detail chosen with love. We had put up those wallpapers together, saved for months to buy that furniture. This was where our life had happened. And now this woman, whom I saw for the first time, was telling me my home was outdated? But I stayed silent. Because Eric sat beside me, looking at Emily with such love that I couldn't ruin his happiness. I simply nodded and said, "Perhaps you're right. I really haven't redecorated in a long time." Karen nodded with satisfaction, as if she had just won a small victory. When they were leaving, Eric hugged me and whispered, "Thank you, Mom. You were wonderful. Emily and Karen loved you." I smiled, but inside everything twisted into a tight knot. Because I knew they didn't love me. They evaluated me, like an item in a store. And I didn't pass. But I still didn't know that this was only the beginning. That soon these two women would start methodically destroying my life, turning me into a shadow in my own home. 2 weeks after we met, Eric came to see me with a serious expression. He sat across from me, took my hands and said, "Mom, I want to marry Emily. I love her. She's the woman I want to spend my life with." I was happy, truly. Despite Emily's coldness and Karen's arrogance, I wanted my son to be happy. And if Emily made him happy, then I would accept her. I hugged Eric and said, "I'm glad, honey. Truly glad. When's the wedding?" He smiled, but there was tension in that smile. "Mom, we want to do everything beautifully. A real wedding. A restaurant, guests. Everything the right way. But I don't have much money right now. My mortgage, the car loan. You understand? So I thought, maybe you could help us." I nodded. "Of course I'll help. How much do you need?" Eric hesitated. "Well, Emily wants a nice wedding. About 150 guests. Plus the dress, the suit, rings, photographer, videographer, decorations. We calculated it. We need about $50,000. I froze. $50,000. It was an enormous amount of money. But I looked at my son's face, at the hope in his eyes, and I could not refuse. I nodded and said, "Fine. I'll give you the money." Eric rushed to hug me, kiss my cheek, thank me. "Mom, you're the best. Thank you, thank you. We'll have a wedding everyone will remember." And they did. The wedding was set for June. I transferred the money to Eric, withdrawing it from the account Andrew had left me. He said he would take care of the planning together with Emily and Karen. I offered to help, but Emily politely declined. "Don't worry, Mrs. Henderson. We'll handle everything ourselves. You just need to come and enjoy the celebration." I felt myself being pushed aside, but I stayed silent. Maybe it was better that way. Maybe they wanted everything done their own style. When the wedding invitation arrived, I noticed that my name was printed in tiny letters at the very end of the guest list. Not mother of the groom, just Linda Henderson. I swallowed the hurt and told myself it was a small thing. The most important thing was my son's happiness. The wedding day came. I put on my best dress, had my hair done at the salon, even bought new shoes. I wanted to look dignified. I wanted Eric to be proud of me. The restaurant was luxurious. A huge hall decorated with white flowers, crystal chandeliers, live music. There were many guests. Most of them I didn't know. They were Emily's friends and colleagues, Karen's relatives, business partners. From Eric's side there were maybe 15 people at most. When I walked into the hall, the coordinator greeted me and led me to my seat. I thought they would place me at the main table next to the newlyweds. After all, I was the mother of the groom. But instead, the coordinator escorted me to a far corner of the hall, to a table where some of Emily's distant relatives sat, people I had never seen before. I sat down and felt a wave of hurt rise inside me. But I pushed it down immediately. It was their wedding. Maybe this was how things were done. Maybe I was too sensitive. The wedding truly was beautiful. Emily looked like a princess in her white gown embroidered with pearls. Eric was happy, he couldn't take his eyes off her. Karen sat next to the couple in the center of attention, accepting congratulations as if it were her own wedding. When it was time for toasts, Karen stood up first. She gave a long speech about how wonderful Emily was, how proud she was of her daughter, how happy she was that she had found a worthy husband. She didn't mention me once. Not a single word about how Eric grew up in love and care, how he had good parents who raised him well. When it was supposed to be my turn, they simply didn't invite me to the microphone. The coordinator passed the floor to the next guest as if I wasn't even there. I sat in my distant corner, holding a glass of champagne, feeling tears rising in my throat. Eric didn't even notice. He was busy with Emily, guests, congratulations. He didn't come over once, didn't ask how I was, whether I was comfortable, whether everything was all right. After the wedding, I congratulated the newlyweds, hugged Eric, and quietly left. No one noticed my departure. At home, I took off my dress, lay on my bed, and cried. I cried from hurt, from humiliation, from the realization that I had spent $50,000 on a celebration where they treated me like I didn't exist. But I told myself, it's only one day. Now they will begin their life together and everything will get better. I will be a good mother-in-law, I will help, I will support them. And they will appreciate it. How wrong I was. A week after the wedding, Eric came again. This time with Emily. They sat across from me and I immediately noticed Eric looked embarrassed. Emily sat with her chin raised, a cold smile on her lips. Eric began to speak. Mom, Emily and I decided to buy our own house. We don't want to rent anymore. We need something of our own. We found a perfect place in Greenwich. A 3-story home with a yard, a forest view. An ideal place for our future family. I nodded. That's wonderful, Eric. I'm happy for you. He hesitated. But the problem is, we don't have enough money. The mortgage doesn't cover the full amount. We need a down payment. $100,000. I froze. $100,000. Another $100,000. I had just given them $50 for the wedding. And now he was asking for $100 more. Mom, I know it's a lot, Eric continued. But it's an investment in our future. In your future grandchildren. We'll pay you back, we definitely will. We just can't do it right now. I looked at Emily. She stayed silent, but there was expectation in her eyes. He was certain I would agree. And I did. Because I still hoped that this would bring me closer to my son. That he would appreciate my help. That I would become part of their life. I said, fine. I'll give you the money. Emily smiled at me for the first time. Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. You're very kind. Eric hugged me, kissed my cheek. Thank you, Mom. You won't regret it. We'll be happy. A month later they bought the house. I went to see it. Enormous, luxurious, with marble floors and panoramic windows. I was happy for them. But when I said I would like to visit from time to time, Emily replied coldly. Of course, Mrs. Henderson. But please notify us in advance. We don't like unexpected visits. I felt a sting. But again I stayed silent. Then came the renovations. Then the furniture. Then a new car for Emily. Each time Eric came with another request. And each time I gave them money. Thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars. I even sold one of the remaining stores to help my son. And with every request, Eric became colder. One day I called him just to ask how he was doing. He answered sharply, Mom, I'm busy right now. I'll call you later. In the background I heard Emily's voice. Tell her not to call every day. It's annoying. And Eric, my son, didn't defend me. He just said, Mom, really don't call so often. We have our own life. And he hung up. I stood there with the phone in my hand, unable to believe it. This was my son. My boy whom I carried, raised, loved. The same son who had just asked me for $100,000. And now he was telling me not to call. In that moment, for the first time, I felt that something was wrong. That I wasn't helping my son, I was being used. But I still didn't want to believe it. After that conversation, I didn't call Eric for several days. I waited for him to call me, apologize, say he had overreacted. But the call never came. I tried to keep myself busy. Visited the stores that still remained after Andrew, checked how things were going. Met with friends, tried to distract myself. But my thoughts always returned to my son. To how he had changed. To how cold his voice had become. And then the invitation arrived. A beautiful card with gold embossing. I opened it and read, "We invite you to a housewarming party in our new home." I was happy. It meant Eric still wanted me to see their house. It meant I wasn't completely erased from their life. I bought a beautiful set of dishes as a gift. Expensive Czech porcelain. I chose a new dress. I wanted to look dignified. The housewarming was on a Saturday. I arrived at the designated time, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I drove up to the gates of their new home and froze. The house truly was huge and beautiful, with big windows and a manicured lawn. I felt proud that I had helped my son afford such a place. I rang the intercom. Emily answered, her voice dry. "Yes. It's me, Mrs. Henderson," I said. "I came for the housewarming." There was a pause. Then Emily said, "Mrs. Henderson, we weren't expecting you today." I was stunned. "What do you mean? You sent me an invitation." "That was a general invitation," Emily replied coldly. "We have important guests today. Eric's business partners, my colleagues. You see, it's not the best time. We still haven't finished some of the rooms, there's construction dust everywhere, the workers just left. Maybe another time." I felt my cheeks burn with shame. I stood there at the gate holding the gift and they wouldn't let me in. Into the house I helped them buy. "Can I at least leave the gift?" I asked quietly. "Leave it by the gate, we'll pick it up later," Emily said and disconnected. I stood motionless before the closed gates. Inside the house I could hear laughter, music, voices. They didn't let me in. My own son didn't let his mother into the housewarming. I placed the box with the dishes by the gate and walked away. Tears streamed down my face, but I wiped them quickly so no one would see. I got into my car and sat there for a long time without starting the engine. I kept thinking what I had done wrong. Why my son allowed them to treat me this way. That evening I called Eric. He didn't answer right away. I could hear music and celebration behind him. "Eric, it's Mom," I said. "Why wasn't I allowed into the housewarming?" He sighed with irritation. "Mom, try to understand. We had important people over. Business connections. It wasn't just a party, it was networking. You wouldn't have fit into that atmosphere. Emily was right not to let you in. We didn't want to put you in an awkward position." "I wouldn't have fit in?" I repeated. "Eric, I'm your mother. I helped buy that house." "Well, yes, and we're grateful," he replied casually. "But that doesn't mean you can come whenever you want. We have our own life now, Mom. Please understand that." He hung up without saying goodbye. I sat in the silence of my enormous house and felt emptiness growing inside me. I had been used. They took the money and erased me from their life. I helped them build their dream and they didn't even let me step inside. But the worst was still ahead. A month later, Karen began appearing in my life more and more often. She visited Eric and Emily almost every day. I found out about it by accident whenever I managed to reach my son on the phone. He would say, "I can't talk right now, Mom. Karen is here. We're discussing the design of the nursery." The nursery? So they were planning a child. I asked carefully about it. Eric answered vaguely, "Well, maybe. We're not sure yet. But Karen is helping us with the design. She has excellent taste." And he never asked me for help. Never asked my opinion. Karen was always there and I was always outside the gate. I tried to accept it. I told myself that Karen was Emily's mother. Of course she was closer to the young couple. Of course they spent more time together. That was normal. But inside me, something tore apart from pain and resentment. One day I met Karen by chance at a shopping mall. She was walking with huge bags, clearly after a successful shopping trip. She saw me and smiled with that same condescending smile. "Oh, Mrs. Henderson. How are you?" she asked, not actually expecting an answer. "I'm fine," I said. "And you?" "Wonderful. I am so glad Emily found Eric. He is such a responsible boy. A bit weak-willed, but nothing we can't fix." She laughed. "And their house turned out wonderful. I'm there almost every day now. Helping them decorate. I've always had a talent for design." I stayed silent. Karen continued. "And you? Do you see Eric often?" "Not really," I admitted. "He's busy." "Well, yes, of course. Young people have their own life. They don't need constant visits from parents." She looked at me attentively. Mrs. Henderson, you need to learn to give children space. Not hover over them. Eric told me you call too often. It stresses him out." I felt something inside me clench. Eric complained about me? Discuss me with this woman? "I just worry about my son," I said quietly. Karen nodded condescendingly. "I understand. But believe me, they're better off without unnecessary control. I, for example, try not to interfere in Emily's decisions. I just help when needed. And everything works beautifully." She waved to me and left, leaving me standing in the middle of the mall feeling utterly humiliated. That was when I understood. Karen was pushing me out of my son's life. Methodically, carefully, persistently. She was taking my place. And Eric was letting her. But I still hoped that once the baby came, everything would change. That I would become a grandmother and Eric would let me back into his life. I hoped for that so much. 6 months later, Eric called with joyful news. His voice trembled with happiness. "Mom, we're having a baby. Emily is pregnant." I burst into tears of joy. Finally something good. I was going to be a grandmother. I would help care be needed. I imagined holding my grandchild, rocking him, singing lullabies like I once sang to Eric. "Congratulations, sweetheart," I said through tears. "That's wonderful news. When is the due date? How is Emily feeling? What can I do? How can I help?" "Thank you, Mom," Eric replied. "She's due in 5 months. Emily feels great. Karen is helping us with everything. She already picked the crib, the stroller, everything we need." Karen. "Maybe I could help too?" I asked carefully. "I could buy something, cook something, come over?" "No need, Mom," Eric replied. "We'll manage. Just try not to worry too much. Everything will be fine." He hung up and I was left holding the phone, feeling myself pushed aside again. But I didn't want to give up. This was my grandchild. My blood. I would not allow myself to be erased. Emily's pregnancy passed without me. I learned the news through short messages from Eric. The ultrasound was good. It would be a boy. Emily felt great. Everything short, without details, without invitations to come. I tried bringing gifts for the baby. I bought clothes, toys, books. I came to their house. This time they let me in. Emily accepted the gifts with a cold smile. "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. But next time please check what we actually need. We already have everything and now these extra things take up space." I nodded, feeling foolish. Labor began in February. Eric called me from the hospital. "Mom, it's a boy. Everything went well. We named him Matthew." I wanted to go to the hospital immediately, but Eric stopped me. "No, Mom. Emily is tired, she needs rest. Come when we're home." I waited a week. Every day I called and asked when I could come. Eric kept delaying. Then he said, "Come on Saturday around noon." I arrived on Saturday with a huge bouquet of flowers and gifts for the baby. My heart was pounding with excitement. I was going to see my grandson, to hold him for the first time. Karen opened the door. She looked like the lady of the house, wearing a robe with a towel over her shoulder. "Oh, Mrs. Henderson. Come in, she said. "Emily is feeding Matthew. Wait in the living room." I walked into the living room and sat down. I could hear soft sounds from the bedroom. A baby's cry, Emily's voice. I waited. 20 minutes passed. Then Emily came out with Matthew in her arms. I stood and stepped closer. The baby was tiny, beautiful, with dark hair like Eric's. I reached out my hands. May I hold him? Emily hesitated. Karen jumped in immediately. Emily, darling, he just ate. Better not disturb him. Put him in the crib. But I really want to hold him, I said quietly. Karen gave me an assessing look. Do you know how to hold a newborn properly, Mrs. Henderson? It's very delicate. His neck isn't strong yet. One wrong move could hurt him. I raised a child, I replied, trying to keep calm. I know how to hold a baby. Well, that was a long time ago, Karen noted. You might have forgotten. And besides, the recommendations are different now. Science has advanced. Emily walked past me silently and placed Matthew in the crib. I stood there with empty hands, feeling something tear inside me. May I at least look at him up close? I asked. Of course, Emily nodded. Just be quiet. He's falling asleep. I approached the crib and looked at my sleeping grandson. So tiny, so fragile. My grandson. And I couldn't even hold him. Over tea, Karen talked about how she helped Emily, how they bathed Matthew together, how she taught her daughter how to feed him, swaddle him, soothe him. I sat there silently, realizing my place had been taken. That I was a stranger in their home. When I was getting ready to leave, Matthew woke up and began to cry. Emily took him in her arms, rocking him gently. Instinctively, I reached out. Let me try to calm him? Emily handed me the baby. I took him carefully, held him to my chest, gently rocked him. Matthew slowly calmed down. I felt his warmth, his tiny heartbeat against mine. Tears rose to my eyes from pure happiness. And then Karen suddenly walked up and snatched Matthew out of my arms. You're holding him incorrectly, she said coldly. You must support the head like this. You could have hurt him. I was holding him correctly, I whispered. Karen looked at me with disdain. Mrs. Henderson, I understand you want to help. But please don't try to teach young parents how to raise a child. You had your methods 35 years ago. Things are different now. If you can't accept the modern approach, perhaps it's better not to interfere. I stood there with empty hands, my cheeks burning from shame and hurt. Eric stayed silent, stared at the floor. He didn't defend me. Didn't say Karen was wrong. I left their house heartbroken. I realized I wasn't just being pushed out of my son's life. I was being pushed out of my grandson's life too. Karen had taken my place completely. She was there every day, helping, participating. And I was nobody. I went home, sat in my chair and cried. I cried for the lost bond with my son, for the grandson I wasn't allowed to love, for my helplessness. And for the first time I wondered, what if Andrew really knew this could happen? What if his will was not just care, but protection? Protection from what? And how did it work? I didn't know the answers yet. But soon I would. Very soon. 3 months passed since Matthew's birth. 3 months during which I saw my grandson only 4 times. And every time Karen was there, monitoring every move I made, every word I said. I couldn't feed Matthew, I couldn't bathe him, I couldn't even hold him for more than 5 minutes. There was always a reason to take him from me. I called Eric, asked for permission to visit. He refused, saying Emily was tired, the baby was fussy, they were busy. But I knew, Karen was there almost every day. And then something happened that changed everything. One Thursday morning, Emily called me. Her voice sounded tense. Mrs. Henderson, I have an urgent appointment. I need to go to the doctor for a few hours. My mom can't come, she's busy. Could you watch Matthew? I couldn't believe my ears. For the first time in 3 months they were asking me for help. Of course. I exclaimed. Of course I'll come. When do you need me? In an hour. Eric already left for work, so you'll be alone with the baby. Will you manage? I will, I assured her. I rushed to their house in 40 minutes. Emily met me at the door, already dressed, clearly in a hurry. She quickly explained where everything was, how to feed him, when to change him. She spoke fast, nervous. If anything happens, call me, she said, grabbing her bag. I'll be back in about 3 hours. And she left, leaving me alone with my grandson. I took Matthew into my arms and held him close. He was warm, smelling of milk and baby lotion. I rocked him, sang a lullaby, and tears of happiness gathered in my eyes. For the first time I could simply be with him, without Karen, without criticism, without control. Matthew fell asleep in my arms. I gently laid him in the crib, covered him with a blanket. I sat beside him, watching his peaceful little face, thinking about how unfair life was. This was my grandson, yet I hardly had any place in his life. I went to the kitchen, deciding to cook something for Emily's return. Maybe if I proved myself useful, they'd invite me more often? I began making soup, chopping vegetables, putting the pot on the stove. And then the phone rang. Not mine, Emily's. She had left it on the kitchen table. I didn't want to look. It wasn't my business. But the phone kept ringing insistently over and over. I glanced at the screen. It was Karen calling. The call stopped, but then a message came through. The screen lit up and I saw the text without meaning to. What I read froze me where I stood. A message from Karen said, "Push harder. If the old woman doesn't put the house in Eric's name, we won't get full control. Use the baby, that works best." I stood gripping the table, unable to believe my eyes. The old woman. That was me. They were discussing me, planning how to take my home. I picked up the phone with shaking hands. I knew I shouldn't, but I couldn't stop myself. I opened the conversation between Emily and Karen. What I saw shattered my heart. Message after message. Karen, don't let her see Matthew too often. She needs to feel useless. When she's desperate, offer the deal. The house in exchange for access to the baby. Emily, but that's cruel. She's his grandmother. Karen, don't soften. Think about our future. He has 3 stores in the house. That's millions. Eric is the only heir. If she transfers everything to him now, we can manage it. Otherwise, we'll have to wait until she dies. And that might be 20 years. I scrolled further. Each message was a knife. Karen described how to isolate me from the family, how to make me seem incompetent and outdated. She wrote that Eric was weak-willed and easy to control through Emily. And then I saw the message that broke me completely. Karen, don't tell Eric about Chicago. Until he gets the house from his mother, that information must stay between us. If he finds out now, everything will fall apart. Chicago? What Chicago? I scrolled more, searching. And I found it. A message from 3 months ago. Emily, I saw messages in Eric's phone from some Anastasia in Chicago. Who is she? Karen, don't get involved. Until we own the house in Greenwich, don't bring it up. Men are all the same. Focus on securing the future. Deal with him later after everything's in your name. I sank onto the chair, feeling the ground vanish beneath me. Eric was cheating on Emily. He had someone in Chicago. And Karen knew, but kept silent because getting my house was more important to her. It was a scheme. A calculated, cynical scheme. They had used me from the beginning. I gave $50,000 for the wedding. $100,000 for the house. All the humiliation, the distance from my grandson. It was all part of the plan. They were breaking me, making me vulnerable so they could offer the deal. I photographed the messages with my own phone. My hands shook so badly I could barely press the buttons. I made screenshots of every crucial text. I put Emily's phone back on the table and walked to the window. I stared outside but didn't see anything. My mind was chaos. Pain, betrayal, fury blending together. Matthew cried in the bedroom. I wiped my tears and went to him. I picked him up, held him close. He looked at me with his big innocent eyes. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," I whispered. "I'm sorry your family turned out this way." I rocked him gently, trying to calm both him and myself. My thoughts raced. What should I do? Who could I trust? How could I protect myself? Then I remembered Edward Grant's words from a year ago after Andrew's death. If something goes wrong, come to me. I know what to do. Andrew had foreseen this. He knew something like this could happen. And he left protection. When Emily returned, I greeted her calmly. I smiled, told her everything went well, that Matthew behaved wonderfully. She thanked me politely and I left. But now I knew the truth. And I wasn't going to stay silent. The next day I would call Edward Grant. But first I needed to learn everything. Absolutely everything. Because I felt this wasn't the whole picture. Chicago, Anastasia, Eric's hidden plans. There was something more. And I would find out. I had to. 2 days passed after that accidental discovery. 2 days during which I hardly slept, replaying the messages in my mind. Trying to piece together the whole story, but something was missing. Who was Anastasia? What business did Eric have in Chicago? Why did he need my house so badly? The answer came unexpectedly. Saturday morning, someone rang my doorbell. I opened the door and saw a woman in her 40s standing on my porch, dressed in a tailored suit, with short hair and intelligent, observant eyes. She looked composed, professional, and tired. "Mrs. Henderson?" she asked. "Yes, that's me," I replied cautiously. "My name is Veronica. I work with your son at the same company. May I come in? I need to speak with you. It's important." I hesitated. A stranger, a colleague of my son. But something in her eyes told me she wasn't there to harm me. I let her in. We sat in the living room. Veronica refused tea and got straight to the point. "Mrs. Henderson, I've spent a long time deciding whether I should come here. It's not really my business, I know. But I can't stay silent when someone is being deceived. You seem like a good woman. And what your son is doing, it's wrong." "What is my son doing?" I asked, feeling my heart beat faster. Veronica took a folder out of her bag and placed it on the table in front of me. "Eric is seeing another woman. It's been more than a year. Her name is Natalie. She lives in Chicago. They met at a business conference. And it's not just an affair." She opened the folder. There were photographs. Eric and a beautiful blonde in a restaurant. Eric hugging her on a river walk. They were kissing. In one picture they stood in front of an office building holding hands. I stared at the photos, unable to believe it. My son. My Eric. He had a wife, a newborn baby. And he was cheating. Shamelessly. "That's not all," Veronica continued. She pulled out printed messages. "I learned about Natalie through mutual acquaintances. I asked for help. She agreed because she herself suspected Eric was using her. I took the papers with shaking hands and began to read. The correspondence between Eric and Natalie was explicit. He wrote about love, about wanting to be with her, about how he was tired of Emily. He wrote that the marriage was a mistake, that Emily was forced on him, that he wanted a divorce. But then it got worse. Eric wrote, "We need to wait a little longer. My mother will transfer the house to me and then I can use it as collateral for our business. We'll open a branch in Chicago and I'll move to you. Just wait a couple more months." Natalie replied, "I've been waiting a year. How long will this take? You have a wife, a child. You promised to divorce." Eric, "I will divorce. But first I need to secure myself financially. If I leave now, Emily will take half. But if I transfer my mother's house to myself, then take a loan against it, we'll have the starting capital. She's old anyway, she doesn't need such a big house." I couldn't breathe. He planned to take my house. Not for his wife. Not for Matthew. For his mistress. For a business with her. Then there was another exchange. Eric discussed loan details with someone. He wrote that the house was valued at $2 million, that he could get $1.5 million as a secured loan. That this would be enough to open an investment company in Chicago. He wanted to take the house Andrew had built for us. Use it as collateral. Me. What did he expect from me? To be left with nothing? Veronica waited silently while I absorbed the information. I finally looked up at her. "Why are you showing me this? You're his colleague." "I was his colleague," she corrected gently. "I resigned 2 weeks ago. I didn't want to work in a company where people like Eric are considered successful." She sighed. "You know, I'm a mother myself. 2 kids. And it hurts me to see a son deceiving a mother who clearly gave him everything." "I did," I whispered. "Everything I could." Veronica nodded. "I know. Eric bragged at work that his mother sponsors his life. That she's naive and convenient." His words, not mine. Tears streamed down my face, but I didn't wipe them away. Naive and convenient. That was how he spoke about me. "There's more," Veronica said. "Eric has problems at work. Financial misconduct. He transferred company funds into his own accounts, hid them through complicated schemes. I discovered it by accident while reviewing documents. I reported it to management. There's an internal investigation. If it's confirmed, he'll be fired. Possibly prosecuted. I covered my face with my hands. My son. My only child. Thief. A liar. An adulterer. A man willing to throw his mother out for money and another woman. What should I do? I asked through tears. Veronica handed me a tissue. Protect yourself. I don't know how, but you must. Eric won't stop. He already promised Natalie that everything will be ready in a month. He's planning to force you to sign the documents somehow. I remembered Edward Grant's words. Andrew had foreseen this. He left protection. I have a lawyer, I said, wiping my tears. My husband left something. I'll go to him. Good, Veronica nodded. Do it soon. And here. He handed me a flash drive. This has all the evidence. Photos, messages, documents about Eric's financial violations. Use it if you need to. I took the flash drive, holding it tightly. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Veronica stood. I'm sorry it turned out this way. I hoped I was wrong about Eric. But facts don't lie. She left, and I remained alone with the folder of evidence. I sat in silence, flipping through the photographs, rereading the messages. With every line, the scale of the betrayal grew clearer. Eric deceived everyone. Me, Emily, even his own mistress, promising her what he could never give. He had used me like an ATM. Karen and Emily had manipulated me to gain control over my assets. And Eric planned to take everything and run away to another woman, leaving his wife and child with nothing. I realized Andrew had been right. He knew, maybe not the details, but he knew something like this could happen. And he left me the tools to protect myself. It was time to use them. I picked up the phone and dialed Edward Grant. Mr. Grant, this is Mrs. Henderson, I said when he answered. I need to meet with you. Immediately. I believe it's time to activate what my husband talked about. There was a pause on the line, then the lawyer said, I'm expecting you. Come today. I think we have a serious conversation ahead. I hung up and looked at the folder of evidence. A war had begun. But this time I wasn't going to lose. I arrived at Edward Grant's office. An old building in the center of New York, wooden stairs creaking underfoot, the smell of old books and coffee. The attorney met me at the door, shook my hand and led me inside. I knew you'd come sooner or later, Mr. Grant said, seating me across from his desk. Andrew was a wise man. He foresaw many things. I took out the flash drive and the folder Veronica had given me and placed them on the table. Mr. Grant, I said, my son is planning to take my house. Use it as collateral for a business with his mistress. His wife and mother-in-law have been manipulating me for months to gain control. Andrew told me he left protection. It's time to use it. The lawyer nodded, opened a safe and took out a thick folder. When Andrew was writing his will, he began, we talked for a long time about risks. He understood that after his death you might become vulnerable, that someone might pressure you or manipulate you, even your own son. He knew Eric was capable of this? I asked quietly. Mr. Grant paused, then said, he knew anyone is capable of this under certain circumstances. Money changes people, Mrs. Henderson. That's why he created the protective mechanism. He opened the folder and showed me the documents. According to Andrew's will, he continued, all property belongs to you unconditionally. But there is a clause that activates if there is pressure or manipulation from any heirs. If you sign these documents, the mechanism does the following. He listed the points and I listened closely. First, Mr. Grant said, all of Eric's accounts connected to your finances are frozen. Second, a full financial audit is launched regarding all transactions involving your property. Third, your property becomes non-transferable during your lifetime. You cannot sell it, donate it, or transfer it to anyone until your death. This protects you from pressure. Fourth, if any fraud or coercion is discovered, the mechanism triggers complete disinheritance of Eric. I listened, and with each word, strength surged back inside me. Andrew truly thought of me. Even after his death, he protected me. What do I need to do? I asked. Sign these documents, the lawyer replied. Activate the protection. After this, Any attempt by Eric to access your assets will be blocked. He will lose everything he counted on. I took the pen. My hand trembled, but I signed. One document, then another, then a third. With every signature I felt power returning. I was no longer a helpless victim. I was protected. Mr. Grant gathered the documents. This goes into effect immediately, he said. Tomorrow I will file the requests with the banks and begin the audit. If your son attempts anything, he will hit a wall. Thank you, I said softly. Thank you, and thank Andrew. The lawyer looked at me and warned. Mrs. Henderson, they will likely contact you soon. They will feel time slipping away and try to pressure you harder. Be ready. It will be difficult. I'm ready, I replied. And for the first time in many months I truly felt that I was. That evening Eric called. His voice sounded tense. Mom, he said, we need to talk. Come over on Thursday evening. It's important. I knew what this was. The final confrontation. All right, I said calmly. I'll come. For the next 3 days I prepared. Reread the messages, looked at the photographs. Practiced what I would say. Andrew had given me the tools. Veronica had given me the evidence. Now it was up to me. On Thursday I put on my best dress. Not for them, for myself. To feel strong. I took my phone with all the screenshots saved. And I drove to their house, knowing that after this evening, my life would never be the same. When I walked into their house, I immediately felt the tension in the air. Eric met me with a forced smile and led me to the dining room. Emily and Karen were already seated. The table was set, but this was clearly not a friendly dinner. It was a tribunal. Come in, Mom, sit down, Eric said, pointing to the chair across from them. I sat. I looked at the three of them sitting like judges. Karen wore her usual cold smile. Emily looked tense. Eric was nervous. His tapping fingers on the table gave him away. Mom, Eric began, we want to talk to you about something important. About the future of the family. About Matthew. I remained silent, waiting. Karen stepped in, her voice confident and lecturing. Mrs. Henderson, do you realize you live in a huge house all alone? It's irrational. At your age, you don't need that much space. And maintaining such a house is expensive. I manage just fine, I replied calmly. But why? Karen leaned forward. Eric is your only heir. Eventually everything will go to him. Why not make that happen now? You could live peacefully, knowing you secured your grandson's future. Eric supported her. Mom, I'm your son. Don't you trust me? I just want to put the house in my name. For safety, for Matthew's future. You want your grandson to thrive, right? I looked straight at him and asked, why do you need my house, Eric? You already have your own. He hesitated, then said, it's an investment, a chance to expand the business. Mom, you don't understand financial matters. Karen cut in sharply. You're being selfish, Mrs. Henderson. Clinging to property instead of helping your family. You're ruining your relationship with your son with your control and distrust. Emily added quietly, staring at the table. If you truly loved Matthew, you would think about his future. I slowly took out my phone, opened the gallery, placed it on the table, screen facing them. On it was a photo of Eric and Natalie kissing on the riverfront. Silence fell like a stone. What is that? Emily whispered, her eyes glued to the screen. I calmly swiped to the next one. Another photo. And another. Then I opened screenshots of the messages where Eric wrote to Natalie about using my house as collateral for their business. Emily grabbed the phone with trembling hands and began reading. Her face went pale. Tears gathered in her eyes. Where did you get this? Karen shouted, jumping to her feet. From people who actually care, I replied evenly. Then I turned to Karen. I also saved screenshots of your messages with Emily. The ones where you discuss how to pressure the old woman. Where you plan to isolate me from my grandson so you can later blackmail me. You spied on us. Karen gasped in outrage. I defended myself, I corrected her calmly. From people who used me like an ATM. Eric, trying to regain control, raised his voice. Mom, all of this can be explained. Natalie is just a business partner. There's nothing between us. You're lying, Emily whispered, looking up at him with tear-filled eyes. You're lying right to my face. It says right here you want to divorce me, that I was forced onto you, that you're waiting to put the house in your name so you can leave me. Eric stammered, trying to speak, but Emily wasn't listening. She cried as she kept scrolling, each new message shattering her a little more. Seeing the plan fall apart, Karen launched an attack on me. You are poisoning this family. You are destroying my daughter's marriage with your suspicion and lies. I'm not destroying anything, I answered firmly. I'm showing the truth. The one all of you hid from me. Eric jumped up, slammed his fist on the table. This is my family. My house. You have no right to come here and ruin everything. I stood slowly and looked him straight in the eyes. Your house. The house I gave you $100,000 for? The wedding that cost $50,000? The furniture, the car, everything else? All of it paid with my money. You're supposed to help me. Eric shouted, his face red with anger. You're my mother. It's your obligation. And you are my son, I said, my voice shaking. But you betrayed me. Used me. Humiliated me. Planned to throw me out into the street for your mistress. Karen stepped forward and jabbed a finger at me. Apologize. You must apologize to us for interfering. And then Eric, without thinking, supported her and said the words that would change everything. His mom. Apologize to Karen. Or get out of my house. Those words hung in the air. Emily lifted her head and looked at her husband with confusion and horror. Eric, what are you saying? That's your mother. But he didn't hear her. He looked at me, expecting me to break, to apologize, to become convenient again. I picked up my purse, looked at my son one last time, and I said the words that changed everything. Handle your own problems, Eric. I'm leaving. And I walked out of the house without looking back. Behind me, I heard Emily shouting, demanding explanations. I heard Karen trying to say something, making excuses. But I no longer cared. I had made my choice. And for the first time in a long while, I felt free. The next morning, everything Eric never expected began. Edward Grant activated the protection mechanism, and the consequences came quickly. First, every account connected to my property was blocked. Eric tried to withdraw money, his card didn't work. He tried to make transfers. The operations were denied. He called the bank, yelled at the operators, demanded answers. They politely informed him that, by court order, a financial audit had begun on all transactions related to the Henderson estate. He called me in rage. Mom, what have you done? You blocked my accounts. I protected my property, I replied calmly. The property your father left me. He foresaw something like this could happen. You've lost your mind. Eric shouted. I'm your son. How could you do this to me? How could you plan to use my house as collateral for your mistress? I asked. How could you spend months humiliating me, using me? He had no answer and hung up. 3 days later, the house in Greenwich was hit with a freeze order. The bank, having learned about Eric's financial misconduct, froze the mortgage and launched an investigation. It turned out he submitted falsified income documents and hid his real financial situation. The house was suddenly at risk of repossession. Emily called me in tears. Mrs. Henderson, what's happening? They're telling us the house might be taken away. That Eric falsified paperwork. I don't understand any of this. Emily, I said gently, your husband lied not only to you. He lied to everyone, the bank, his employer, me. He lived far beyond his means, and now the truth has surfaced. But what am I supposed to do? I have a baby, she cried. Divorce him, I advised. File now before everything gets seized. Protect yourself and Matthew. I'll help you with a lawyer. She was silent for a moment, then whispered, Thank you. I'll think about it. A week later, Emily filed for divorce. She took Matthew and moved to her aunt's house, far from Eric and Karen. Karen tried to keep her daughter from leaving, but Emily was resolute. She had learned the whole truth about the affair, the schemes, the plans, and she wanted nothing more to do with him. Then Natalie found out Eric had lost access to his mother's money, that the house was frozen, that his accounts were blocked. She called him and said simply, Eric, this won't work. I'm not getting involved with someone who has these kinds of problems. I'm sorry. Don't call me again. And she vanished from his life. Just like that. The woman he was ready to leave his family for, betray his mother for, destroy everything for. She walked away the moment the money disappeared. At work, an internal audit began. Before resigning, Veronica had left documents showing Eric's financial misconduct. The auditors found evidence that he transferred company funds to his own accounts, created fake contracts, and hid operations. He was given a choice: resign voluntarily or face criminal charges. Eric signed the resignation. In 2 weeks, his life collapsed completely. No wife. No mistress. No job. No money. His house under a freeze order. Everything he built on lies and manipulation had fallen apart. And then on Saturday morning, I heard a knock on my door. I opened it and saw Eric. He looked terrible: unshaven, wrinkled clothes, dark circles under his eyes. He stood there silently. "Come in," I said. We sat in the living room. He stared at the floor, unable to meet my eyes. "Why did you do this?" he finally asked quietly. "Why did you ruin my life?" "Me?" I repeated. "Eric, you ruined your own life. With lies, betrayal, greed. I simply protected myself." "I'm your son," he shouted. "You were supposed to help me." "I helped you all your life," I replied calmly. "I paid for your education, your wedding, your house. I gave you hundreds of thousands of dollars. And what did I receive in return? Humiliation. Lies. Manipulation. You planned to take my house and throw me into the street." He clenched his fists, saying nothing. "Your father left me tools to protect us both," I continued. "Even from you. He knew money could change a person. And he was right. What am I supposed to do now?" Eric asked desperately. "I have nothing left. Emily filed for divorce. I lost my job. They're taking the house. Mom, help me. Please." I looked at him. My son, my only child. Part of me wanted to hug him, to help him as I always had. But I knew that if I helped him now, nothing would change. He would use me again. "No," I said firmly. "I'm not going to help you. You're an adult. You made your choices. Now live with the consequences." "Mom." "I didn't destroy your life, Eric," I interrupted. "You did. With your greed and your lies. And only you can fix it." He stood up, looked at me with pain and anger. "I'll never forgive you," he said. "Maybe," I replied. "But I will no longer be the victim of your manipulation." He left, slamming the door. I sat in the silence, and for the first time I didn't feel guilty. I had done the right thing. Andrew would have been proud of me. 6 months passed. Half a year in which my life changed completely. Emily found a job at a marketing agency. She rented a small apartment, raised Matthew, and learned to stand on her own. We began communicating more often. I helped her with a lawyer and some money at the beginning. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. Emily turned out to be a good woman who had simply fallen under the influence of her mother and husband. She brought Matthew to me on weekends. I held my grandson, played with him, sang lullabies. And now no one pulled him out of my arms or told me I was doing something wrong. It was happiness. Eric lived alone in a small rental apartment. He found work. Ordinary, not prestigious. He paid child support. He saw Matthew occasionally. His life became quiet, modest. Karen tried to keep control, but Emily no longer listened to her. She made her own decisions. And I began to live. For the first time in many years, I lived for myself. I enrolled in painting classes. I discovered I enjoyed it. I traveled, first to Italy, then to Greece. I walked through old streets, drank coffee in outdoor cafes, watched the sea. I felt free. I made new friends, women my age with their own stories and struggles. We met, talked, supported each other. I no longer felt alone. My house came alive. I did a little renovation, not because someone said it was outdated, but because I wanted to. I hung new paintings, bought a comfortable chair, planted flowers in the garden. And then one morning I received a letter. A real paper letter in an envelope, stamped at the post office. I opened it and saw Eric's handwriting. It said, "Mom, I'm still angry. I can't forgive you for what you did. But I'm beginning to understand that you were right. That I destroyed my own life. With my greed, my lies. I lost everything. My wife, my son, my job, my money. And I realized the only thing that was truly valuable was my family. The family I ruined with my own hands. Dad would be proud of you. You turned out stronger than I thought. And I turned out weaker. I'm not ready yet. But maybe someday I'll be able to look you in the eyes without shame. Maybe someday I'll become the son you deserve. Forgive me if you can. Eric. I read that letter with tears streaming down my cheeks. It was the first ray of hope. The first sign that my son might finally be beginning to understand. I didn't respond right away. I needed time to process his words. But I kept the letter. I put it in my desk drawer next to Andrew's photographs. On my 61st birthday, I woke early and went out into the garden. I walked to the rose bush Andrew planted many years ago. The roses were blooming, white and red, smelling of summer and hope. I took a small trowel, dug a little hole beneath the bush. I reached into my pocket and took out Andrew's wedding ring. The one he put on my finger 37 years ago. I held it in my palm, watching the sunlight dance on the gold. "Thank you, Andrew," I whispered. "You protected me even after your death. You knew what could happen and you gave me strength. Now I can handle the rest." I found myself. I placed the ring in the soil and covered it. It wasn't letting go of the past. It was acknowledging that the past had ended. That I was ready to live on. Not for someone else, but for myself. I straightened up, looked at the house, the garden, the sky. And I smiled. Do you know what I learned this year? That loving yourself is also love. That sometimes to save yourself you have to walk away. That there is nothing wrong with protecting your boundaries, even when it involves those closest to you. You are not alone. If you feel used, unappreciated, if you give everything and receive only pain, you have the right to leave. That is not selfishness. That is love for yourself. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this story. Tell us in the comments which moment touched you the most. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss new stories. And give a like if you believe in dignity, and in the truth that it's never too late to start living for yourself. And before you go, check out the story we left here on the screen. We're sure it will make you think and move your heart. Take care of yourself. And remember, you are worthy of love. Especially your own.